I think there's any number of ways we could talk about how programmatic is evolving the CTV ecosystem. One of the ways, though, that I don't think gets enough airtime is how it's lowering the barrier to entry for new participants, right? One of the things that Publica does is provide plug-and-play solutions for publishers to put together a monetization strategy relatively quickly and with low cost, right? And so if you think about how publishers had to go start a monetization strategy with the traditional IO business, it took quite a bit of overhead time and development in order to put a team together and execute, right? But if you wanted to go start a streaming service tomorrow and you had the content, you would, within a couple of days, be able to put together a pretty meaningful monetization solution by plugging into third-party platforms, and you could use them as like an outsourced demand source, for example, right? Same on the buy side. Traditionally, if a buyer wanted to get access to premium connected television inventory, they were a top 200 advertiser, just like in linear television, and they had to have a one-to-one relationship with that content owner, and they would strike a deal, right? And in order to strike that deal, you had to have a meaningful budget, and you'd have to be able to get into that room and have that conversation. But with programmatic, you now have buyers outside of the top 200. You have companies like TV Scientific who are able to work with a lot of these buyers and bring in new and diversified demand sources and buyers into the ecosystem, which is allowing buyers that have meaningful CPMs, let's call it, but let's say not super high budgets, still being able to compete and participate in the auction.
So what are some of the key challenges in adopting programmatic advertising in connected television? I mean, are these auctions happening in real time and the video getting served in real time, like you see in the, let's say, the digital space, digital display, or what's going on there as far as the challenges?
So programmatic is programmatic. So whether it's display or CTV, it's still the same real-time OpenRTB connections. I don't think there's any single hurdle or barrier that is causing the lack of adoption. I think what we're seeing right now, if you go back 5 years, there was little, if any, programmatic activity in connected television. And if you look at where we're at today, you've seen a pretty exponential growth over the last 5 years, right? And that trend line is continuing. What we're seeing is the flywheel speeding up. I don't know of too many publishers or buyers that are anti-programmatic or saying, I'm not going to touch it. What we're seeing is everybody trying it, dipping their toes in the water, getting more and more comfortable, understanding more and more the value of it and the benefits that it provides. And the more they see the benefits, the more they spend, the more inventory gets bought. The more inventory gets bought, the more convergence there is towards programmatic. I think there's definitely things we can do in the world of education to help speed up the adoption. But I don't think there's any hurdles or barriers, definitely not in the technology. And I think now even we've done a really good job of destigmatizing, if you will, what programmatic is, right? I think the word programmatic used to have a pretty negative connotation where it was about remnant and backfill, and it was the last resort option. It wasn't the place that you ever did a meaningful spend or an important transaction, right? But I think now the buyers and the publishers both recognize they get a lot more access, a lot more value, a lot more data and insights and transparency than they ever did in the paper IO. So I think you're going to continue to see the adoption. It takes time as anything else, but it is definitely still going up and up. CTV has done a tremendous job, and I talked about this in the fireside chat we were in. They recognize the single most important asset that a CTV platform has is its eyeballs, right? And with the eyeballs comes the need to maintain a level of user experience. And with that user experience comes you have to make sure that you are transacting in a way, whether it's ad format, whether it's the ads that show up themselves, you have to do it in a responsible way, right? CTV partners today aren't going after the short-term dollar, they're going after the long-term value. And they recognize that value is in the users and the user experience, right? And programmatic is allowing them to test the waters and expand that without putting the user experience at risk.
Well, it's really interesting. So in terms of the objections people may have as far as getting into programmatic, what can you tell them? What kinds of things do they need to overcome, or how can, or actually more to the point, how can you address their fears and concerns about it?
What I tell everybody is There's a lot of value that programmatic provides that I don't think people understand, and it can be a little nuanced and technical, and you have to get in the weeds to fully explain it. I think the easiest way to explain the value of programmatic to somebody, though, is simply put, it provides access. So to the publisher side of the business, it provides access to more demand than they would ever have in the traditional direct IO world. Right? In the traditional direct IO world, there's a one-to-one relationship that a publisher has with a buyer. In programmatic, you remove the need to have that one-to-one relationship. You can give your inventory out to a DSP, and they will put it in front of any number of buyers that you want. You don't have to accept it, but you get to see how they respond to your inventory. You get to understand better the value of it and who's interested in it and who's not. And you get a lot of additional access and diversification of the demand that comes in. Similarly, on the buy side, the buyers now get access to more and more supply than they ever would have in the direct IO world. So instead of saying, I need to go get sports, I have to go to X publisher, it's, I want a sports package. I'm going to go to an SSP and they're going to go create for me my own custom package. And again, this provides access, and this allows them to expand the footprint that they want and reach the audiences that they're ultimately trying to get to. I think the last thing it does is it provides access to more data and insights and transparency and information than the paper IO ever provided. Right, and so again, I think as I'm talking to anyone that's questioning or hesitant about what does programmatic provide, it's really just increased access. So live sports is an interesting one. There's a lot of technical hurdles that exist in live sports due to the concurrent users that don't exist in a lot of traditional connected television. Right, we talked earlier about the kind of barriers to entry and adoption of connected television. Live sports is one of the areas where selling it programmatically is a challenge, and it's something that the entire industry is focused on solving for, right? But it isn't something that is going to be solved overnight, and it's something that's going to take a lot of collaboration across the industry and a lot of partnership to solve for the unique challenges that live sports presents.